This is the 7th video in this series now. The idea is that we are a greater embryo. We are at the 6 to 8 week mark in our development. Our greater mother's electron energies flow down as we are electrifying our greater brain right here at the 6 to 8 week mark in our development, as we are developing this two reality system, the old particle reality, where men are dominant in the regular world with our physical size and strength and testosterone and everything like that. And then the new electric reality where women's beauty translates up into the electric world, women's innocence. Women are innocent. Women spin in the same way. They sort of, they are built internally to have this electric reality, this maternal reality, be the dominant reality inside of them. So they just don't have the kinds of trouble with it that men do. This reality is sort of designed to kill out the men, just to grind the men down into sort of little boy energies, to demasculinize, so that women can become truly feminine. Covered a lot of that stuff in the last video, but now in this video, what we're really going to delve into is this elephant in the room question, this big question: do we have a greater Y chromosome? And so what I have here is I have 8 different points to make trying to prove out that we do have a greater Y chromosome. I think the human race as a whole wants to, in scientific terms, they have something they call sigma 5, which is where when you get to a really, really very great level of certainty. We would like to become very certain about the idea of whether we have a Y chromosome or not. And so the whole world will have to talk about and discuss this, but I'm going to give 8 reasons. But my first one is sort of in a different category. I had developed the following 7 reasons independently. But then I think with the first reason, I think that the Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris election was, I think, a place where humanity really was deciding. So picture this construct, okay? First, let me describe something else here. Okay, imagine that we have to build our world through 3 different time, size, speed level constructs. As another continuation of the theory of everything in physics, how you have electrons and then muons, which are the middle-sized particle. Electrons are very small, muons are bigger, and then taus are even much bigger than that. And you have the electron neutrinos and muon and tau neutrinos and so forth. So you sort of have these same 3 levels all through physics. Well, as we build our greater brain, the first level of our greater brain has America as the actual first level greater brain, and we're going to be connecting out into the rest of the world, connecting. Our American states are going to share in responsibilities with different nations around the world. So we create a new economic system. States and nations will get paid, so they'll have new money on the table. You take on a job and a new set of responsibilities in caring for the earth or moving us up into space or some kind of. We're going to cover all that in either later videos, or once these ideas go viral, I'll cover all that stuff. But anyway, so America is going to be our first level brain, and the world is going to be our first level body. Then at the second level, our whole planet Earth, all human beings on the planet Earth, are going to be our second level brain. And then we're going to tie in with the solar system as we move out into the planets and moons and space stations and all over the solar system. And so the solar system will be our second level body system. And then ultimately at the third level, the entire human race is going to be our greater brain with our 100 billion people or more, 120 billion people spread throughout the solar system, connected into all our billions, 100, 120 billion computer systems, again, spread all around the solar system. And all of that is going to be our third level greater brain, which will then be tied into our dark matter bone structure and our dark energy body system. So right now, we're just dealing with this first level brain, but imagine that as America, when America got started, it was sort of the beginning of this first level brain. And each president, each presidency has put into place one chromosome, one greater chromosome has sort of been getting itself organized into place through each presidency. But on March 4th in 1841, William Henry Harrison died just 9 days or something very, very early into his presidency. And so I think his presidency, although he's counted as a president, he's not counted as a greater chromosome. So there was an offset in the numbering. So Donald Trump's first presidency was really the 44th greater chromosome, which was the last of the normal, the 44, there are 22 maternal chromosomes, 22 paternal chromosomes, and then they each have one sex chromosome. And so Barack Obama, the 43rd president, he really got the default process started, the greater default process, but it was when Joe Biden became president. He just started massively building all this DEI stuff and everything into all the government agencies and the universities, the whole government, the media. I mean, everything was just destroying the men. The reason is the 46, but I'll call it the 45th chromosomal presidency was the X chromosome. So it was the great sex chromosome of the maternal, our greater maternal set of chromosomes. And that is why all the default stuff was just going into overdrive during Joe Biden's time. So then when Trump got elected, I think that was a first fundamental proof that we do have a greater Y chromosome. But so there's this huge, huge problem with this. And I think this is part of how this works. I think the thing is, okay, on the Y chromosome, there is one specific gene called the SRY-Gene. And the SRY-Gene creates a protein, and this single protein goes out and it masks it through some process. And what is it? It's what I'm doing right here. It is given an understanding of how things work, and it explains everything. And this then is what causes the masculinization of the embryo. So it's a protein that is given enough masculine energies internally somehow to create a corridor through the time, size, speed levels to be able to share this information up into the outer consciousness. So the thing is, through Trump's presidency here, he has established the Y chromosome. But if we do not have an SRY gene function, if we do not have this massive high energy function that begins to explain everything so we all understand this, and then using the physics side of the information, we start the greater fusion stuff, we build the greater neutron, and we just start to put it all to build ourselves into greater life. What Trump is doing is just like basically trying to completely knock down the maternal energies. And then in a biological sense, the greater mother will not carry us. She will miscarry the embryo. In physics terms, I'll go back to the phrase I've used a few times now in this series, there's no such thing as a magnetic monopole. If the Republicans really just devour the Democrats, which I think this idea right now Trump is pushing to get rid of the filibuster and then use that power to effectively just collapse every single thing about the Democratic Party. And so there's also the asymptotic freedom problems in physics where the three quarks, the three branches of government are supposed to sort of float like they're inside a loose rubber band. And if one branch of government gets too powerful and pulls away, that can collapse things. So we're at a very high stress, high strain place right now. Okay, so that's my first proof that we do have a greater Y chromosome. Now, for the second one, I need to go back into the physics. We have not yet talked about the Higgs boson, but I need to explain the Higgs boson here. I'm going to tie this in with this SRY-Gene and the SRY protein, and we need to do this. I call this level jumping. When you look at one time size speed level existence and you look at another and then you make a comparison between the two. And so what I'm saying here is the Higgs boson and the SRY-Gene are the same thing at two different time size speed levels. So at the quantum mechanical level, there are two Higgs fields. There's the Higgs 1 field, which is a core field with diffusive. That's what I call for something pushing from the smaller sphere, pushing upwards and outwards, with diffusive chiral spin that pushes upwards and outwards. And then there's a Higgs 2 field with coalescent, that's my word for the outer ring, the electron ring or outer spherical energies, pushing down inwards towards what becomes an inner ring in a woman. Instead of an inner core, or maybe she still has a smaller level core, but it's a little bit different anyway. So you have this Higgs 1 field that is pushing upwards from a smaller core, and then you have a Higgs 2 field with coalescent chiral spin that squeezes downwards and inwards from the outer sphere. And when there's a particle interaction, so remember this is sort of like our solar system. You're talking about a huge area of space in between these two Higgs fields. And when there's a particle interaction, the Higgs 2 field has local symmetries that do not need to break its surrounding global symmetries. But for the Higgs 1 field, it has local symmetries which do need to break the surrounding global symmetries. And the Higgs 1 field does this by emitting a diffusive, zero spin, zero electric charge Higgs boson, which has the sufficient power to break the enclosing global symmetries. And so this you can see this is exactly what we're talking about with ourself here in our world right now and with a human embryo. You have the mother's energies are the global symmetries. You're inside something and all the symmetries surrounding you on all sides. The mother's symmetries are these global symmetries. So if it's a daughter, she's going to have a Higgs 2 field and she's just going to go through the default process and the mother's going to turn her brain female and then she'll develop herself as a girl. But if you have a male being, it has to break those symmetries. And when it does so, it can grow about twice the mass of a normal woman. Like I'm about 6'9" and weigh about 240 pounds, fairly lean. That's about twice a normal female weight. So the whole Higgs boson is about this. It's a concept of developing mass. It causes men to become more massive than women. But so what all this is relating to is that the biggest, most complex machine the human race has ever built is our super colliding superconductor, or whatever you call it there. Should have looked that up or something, but at CERN in Switzerland, and they found the Higgs boson. So we have a Higgs boson. If they had built that whole thing and looked and looked and looked and not found a Higgs boson, that might mean we don't have a Higgs boson. But this is my second point for why we do have a greater Y chromosome is we found the Higgs boson. So then my third point relates to this. Our greater neural network, the World Wide Web, came from CERN and from the discovery of the Higgs boson. Tim Berners-Lee was a scientist working there at CERN, and he figured out the structural concepts of the World Wide Web basically so that CERN could share its very complex data, huge amounts of data that they collect there with other scientists, other physicists around the world. And what he developed was the beginning of the World Wide Web. So to have this Higgs boson is a masculine SRY Y-chromosome gene and protein and all this stuff. We find the Higgs boson, but then also at the same time, this begins our greater neural network, our greater brain. The structure for our greater internet starts right at this masculinizing whole construct. So that's my third proof that we do have a greater Y chromosome. My fourth point is that all of our major religions have been founded by men and have dealt strictly with male God constructs. Way back in the early human history, there were male gods and female gods and everything like that. But I think that the whole Judeo-Christian Islamic set of these three religions are all sort of tied in with this process of growing into greater male life. I think each one is some different aspect of turning us and coming from these various male or female chromosome things that are all three are in agreement that you could talk about Abraham or Moses as founders of Judaism and constant mention of a father God concept. They never says anything about a mother God concept. The Christianity was started by the Son, by Jesus, the Son, and again also deals with a father God concept. And then Muhammad started Islam. And also the concept of Allah has many names and many forms, but basically the whole construct is male. He was a male being, and the God concept of Allah is primarily, at least as far as I know, a male construct. As I was saying earlier, America is really at the center of a whole lot of this stuff, and it's going to be the first level brain, and all of our founders here in America were founding fathers. They're up until recently, some, nowadays during the default, some people may try to focus on some women, but there was always the construct of the founding fathers. George Washington, our first president, was male, and all 47 now, all 46 of the different presidents, every president has been male. And by the way, that's one of the most important concepts for us. If we had had a break, we have a direct chain linking us to Abraham Lincoln, to George Washington. I think part of what creates all these like trans people and stuff is when that chain gets broken, you can really lose a lot of your identity or your masculinity construct. So it's very important to understand. Again, let me reiterate, as I've mentioned in the last video, as we separate into men and women are going to have all kinds of new responsibilities. But keeping basically the way the default process works is it explains things to men, and then either the men are strong enough to hold or they don't. It's just simply as I've been studying this stuff for years and years now, you don't figure something out for the male stuff and it's done. There's constant pressure on men. The universe needs you to be strong. We're going to go out into this galaxy and we're going to meet all kinds of other alien species. And so every single thing is going to be trying to build strong heterosexual men that remain and hold and are strong enough not to get defaulted and not to get eaten alive by the the dragons that are out there, you know. So there's a lot of good pressure, and in some ways you could say bad pressure, in some ways you could say good pressure, just for the men to be strong. You get defaulted if you aren't strong. So but we're very lucky. You know, we've been very close to the edge here for a few years now, but America is unbroken in our connection to Abraham Lincoln, to the men who have won great wars in this country, and to our founding father, George Washington, and to all the other male founding fathers. So that's an important part of us being a male being. Okay, my next point is we have a pair of greater testicles. The idea of a male construct is a core energy that pushes out diffusively, out all around the next larger level. And think about if every country is sort of like a living organ system or a brain system or a body system, the two British Isles, Ireland and England, are like two greater testicles. And they poured out these wooden ships of these men who went out and basically brought half of our world into greater life. America was brought into life by England. Israel was brought into life by England. You have Australia and New Zealand, of course. Canada came out of the British Empire. Lots of parts of Africa. You could talk about, India, of course, but even China and other parts of the Far East. So we have two strong, working, greater testicles. And let me just add, in another time, size, speed dimension, inside the brain, kind of down in back, kind of hanging down, almost like a pair of testicles within the brain. You have a little dip in the bone structure area, and sort of hanging down sort of from the brain in there is the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is the gland that controls growth hormone. So it controls how large you're going to grow into through your embryonic development and then on into the future. And so the British Isles, England will be one of the two. There's two lobes in the pituitary gland. England will be one lobe and Ireland will be the other. And we're going to set up the British Space Bank as our new financial institution, as I'll get to this as we get to the economic stuff. But they're going to control the growth hormone for building out our whole entire greater life. If things work out, some of these things still, details that are going to have to get worked out. Okay, on to my seventh point. But I just think it's really interesting, this storied land of kings and castles, that went out and conquered the world in these old wooden ships, and the British military, the Marines, and everything that the British Empire was, which is largely beloved around the world. I mean, most of the places that were built by the British Isles have remained connected to them. I think the island of Barbados recently separated completely, but Canada, Australia, New Zealand, much of the parts and places that were connected to England originally still have great relationships and great honor and connection there. So that's kind of a cool thing. Okay, my seventh point is just these ideas right here. I think when it comes to the midterms, there's a chance if the Democrats win in a year from now in the midterms, then they may end Trump's whole Y-chromosome presidency here. I mean, so we have a brief window to get these ideas out and hopefully stop all this asymptotic, the magnetic monopole, the mother miscarrying the embryo, all we're at risk of all this stuff. But I'm have these ideas and I'm trying to get them out, hopefully in time, myself doing this job of the Higgs boson or of a greater SRY particle. And that's a time particle. The Higgs boson is a time particle. And so, you'd expect it to be good at timing. And I think this is, the fact that these ideas are coming into our world right at this exact time. I would say that's another proof that we do have a greater Y chromosome. And probably the biggest one, well, certainly physically the biggest one of all, but if you're looking for a sigma 5 concept of, with all these other proofs, a final absolute proof is if you take this entire gigantic, huge solar system, 99.9% of the mass and matter and energy of this solar system is locked into the sun. There's no way that it's a coincidence that we call our star sun. It just is not that's just not a coincidence. It's pronounced the exact same way. S-O-N, S-U-N. You pronounce both of them exactly the same, sun. Inside the sun should be all of our greater DNA. And we should have a greater Y chromosome in there. And sometime, not right now, I'll explain the way I think, but we're sort of like a ribosome. We're out in the sort of cellular fluid, and the inside the nucleus sends energies out to the ribosome, and the proteins get certain functions then, and so all the different proteins within the cell start doing very much what humans do. And so we humans are like in another related time, size, speed dimension. We are sort of like, our computers may all connect together like the DNA, so they may be like the maternal DNA or something, the paternal DNA. We humans may be in this example inside a cell. I think as cells, we're like greater glial cells, and then the computers are like the greater neurons. But you go inside the cells, and the connected and electrified DNA is like the greater computers locked together into the internet, into a little tiny bantam internet. And then the proteins are, like bantam intracellular human beings that start building and bringing the cell into life. And so, we're getting our energies coming out to us from our greater DNA inside the sun building us into a sun, into a greater sun. And those are my basic proofs. I think people should talk about this and think about this. And for women, I think part of some of the changes to come are going to be more men definitely locking down into some of the presidential and prime minister positions. But there may be some nations, it may be that we do, I think we're going to build Adam first. We're going to build a greater Adam, a concept of the greater men, because men are subject to these defaults. And I don't think I'm going to get into this video series, but very quickly, when a human embryo is going through this default, there are 29 different parts of the brain which can default. In other words, when they study them, they'll see that 29 different parts will go through a definite masculinizing effect, or they go through a definite feminizing event when and it can be different. Some men may only have 5 or 6 masculinizing events. That's enough to turn them male, but they'll be sort of, not a super ultra masculine type male. If you have all 29 of these things strongly masculinized, that's going to build an ultra heterosexual, strong male energies. So we're going to have to look at all this stuff, figure out what these 29 types of default are, figure out what kind of being we want to be together. Actually, any area that you go to masculinize, it's sort of like you're building an equalizer, and you're now putting the men into a relationship with the women. And so if something defaults, that's often something that you just don't see or don't realize it. It's not like the more ultra masculine you develop yourself to be, that's totally, you know, I think an ultra masculine being has stronger internal female energies because the female and men are going to connect on every one of these areas and have 29 separate independent areas where their relationship focuses on these different things. And a good relationship between the men and women, I think the women play a strong role as navigators. In the new relationship, women, the critical energies of women is sort of where they're saying how they think we should do things, how we should build the world, how they want things to go, how they want the relationship, how they think, a lot of stuff. What should our relationship with animals? We're in the middle of a great die out of animals. Women are going to play a large role in responsibility for all that sort of stuff. There's going to be lots of new money flowing for taking care of all these different sorts of issues. So there's going to be plenty of stuff for women to do, plenty of stuff for men to do. But I don't want to leave you with the impression that the more strongly we masculinize our world, that's, like hurting women in any way. I think women want that too. And again, I think was in the last video, I mentioned that women are largely going to play a role of political type responsibility for gays and for lesbians. These almost become sort of like two children energies that the women are sort of in charge with, and they work in a much more democratic way than the men would. Men make the rules to make sure that nothing is defaulting us, and then women sort of play the leadership role there, along with a big leadership role around the world. But with, I think, the critical thing, any single area where women ultimately take over, they're going to default that area. And so if you can have something where like you have a man that is ultimately in charge, but then, you work something out with women, you form your bit by bit, piece by piece, a big, exciting part of our world in the coming years is going to be figuring out this whole new relationship. I'll say here finally, we've talked about in an earlier lecture about our American government being like a greater proton. And a greater proton is made up of about 938 MeV, or you could say just under 1 GeV, 1 giga-megavolt, or whatever, however you say it. Well, a Higgs boson is made up of about 125 GeV. So in other words, it's about 130 times the power and energy of a proton. So these Higgs boson energies in our world, the Higgs boson is very short-lived. And you've heard about inflation in physics, right? So I think we have a very short period of time where we're going to have the old laws and rules that our whole world operated by, which are all clearly breaking down right now. A lot of the corruptions in governments, this asymptotic freedom problem, all these kinds of things are starting to break down. And if you picture a little acorn, which has rules inside the tree seed, inside the acorn, but then it breaks out, and pretty quickly it has to realize what are the rules of the next larger time, size, speed level. But these are going to be, inflation is you have a brief period of time where you start to build and reset and reorganize everything, a greater fusion time where you reorganize all this stuff. But then pretty quickly, you're going to have to lock into a new set of your understanding of these universal rules of what the rules for the, what are the solar rules going to be for us? As we come into real contact with the solar system, this is the greater egg cell around us. And we're going to have to figure things out and figure out a whole new set of rules. And then things are going to lock back down. But so we may have a period of time here where we have this high energy of the Higgs boson, and we have new money, and the whole world now can communicate using the internet and everything. So everybody can go to work, make YouTube videos. Colleges and universities will work on things. Governmental works on things. Next video, I think we're going to start to delve into some of the greater fusion and the greater neutron structure. And that's all very anthropomorphic of really thinking about this new relationship between men and women. So that's where we go. That's where we go next. So I'll see you then. Thank you.